All right, Denny, you want to take it away?
Sure. So this is from our new book, Simple Homebrewing. The whole thing was based on my concept of make the best beer possible with the least effort possible while having the most fun possible. I haven't been brewing as long as Ed. I've only been at it for 22 years. I've done 566 batches in that time. So what I've learned is that it's a hobby, damn it, and it's got to be fun. So we've done three books. Experimental Homebrewing was our first one. Homebrew All Stars was the second one, where we interviewed 25 of the world's best homebrewers and just got their ideas. It's kind of like you get to spend a brew day with them. Simple Homebrewing is like not a beginner's book, as you might tend to think. Simple Homebrewing is about how to figure out what matters and what doesn't in your process and cut it out so that you can actually enjoy your brew day more. So we do two podcasts, and one or the other comes out every week. One is called Experimental Brewing. It's like about an hour and a half, 2 hour show, wide ranging. We cover home brewing, we cover the craft beer world. Latest episode that will be coming out sometime in the next week is an all question and answer show. We do one of those every once in a while. And then the Brew Files is like, what, about 45 minutes?
Yeah, 35 to 50 minutes at the most.
Yeah, and Drew kind of puts that together and picks like a single topic to focus in on, a beer style, recipe, something like that.
There you go. All right.
This is
So
you.
now, while Denny has his comment about, hey, the best beer possible. This is my philosophy that fermentation is entropy captured. If you look around us, fermentation happens. The big thing that we are trying to do as brewers is make it so that fermentation happens the way we want it to, right? Because it will happen no matter what we do. So we need to steer it. Now, most homebrewers, so Denny's got a science background. I'm an engineer, or at least I used to be an engineer. Now I'm a director, so I don't do anything useful. But most of us are technically minded, geeky sorts, and we sort of have a problem that we tend to overthink everything that we're doing when we're doing the brewing stuff, right?
Yep.
Now, the reason why I say that we tend to overthink it is this is a bunch of grinding gear from 15,000 years ago found in the Zagros Mountains in Iran. This is how humanity started when making beer. If you can make beer with that, you can certainly make beer with the stuff that we have around us without having to think too hard about it. Again, beer wants to happen. Malted barley wants to become beer.
That's true. That is very true.
So what we say here, this is one of my favorite pictures ever taken from one of our books.
No kidding.
Be more like the goat. He's just having fun and enjoying the beer. And for the record, he is actually drinking a Bock beer.
What else? Okay, so I got into this a minute ago. What your whole concept should be is brew the best beer possible with the least amount of work possible while having the most fun possible. Because it's a hobby, and if you're not having fun, then you're doing something wrong. And the least amount of work, I mean, for some reason, it seems like homebrewers have this feeling like you're not brewing unless you're doing everything the hard way. And I guarantee you there is no brewery in the world that purposely does everything the hard way. So the idea is to identify what doesn't lead to better beer or more fun when you're making it and get that out of your process, because there's no point in it being there. But what simplicity means is very different for everybody. I mean, you get to decide for yourself what simple is.
All right. Now, some of this is actually a little reversed from when we first wrote about it.
Yeah, so why don't we just skip over this?
Yeah. All right. But the biggest thing to take away, part of the reason why we care about it is most homebrewers these days, or most people who are in that age when they start to become homebrewers, they're not the same sort of obsessive, right? They're not like, hi, my name is Drew Beechum. I'm a homebrewer, right? They're like, hi, I'm Drew. I make things. And so that's actually kind of a part of a problem that we're seeing. And also with how people's lives change as they get older, there's more problems that we have to think about, like in terms of making brewing too complicated. That's the real deal out of there.
Yeah, right.
So this is very true. The reason why we really actually care is that simpler processes, simpler times that you're doing this means that you are more likely to brew, right? And just as a perfect example, stop and think about it. How many out there still bottle, right? And I'm not talking occasionally bottle. I mean, you bottle everything. And I'm going to guess that there's very few of you that do that. And part of the reason
if you're one of them, we're very sorry for you.
Bottling 10 gallons tonight. 10 gallons being bottled.
Oh,
you're a better man than I. So,
Yeah.
I mean, to give you an idea of part of the reason why we talk about that, I'm here in my brewery right now, talking to you guys. When I first bought a house, I got super excited because that meant I could build a real brew system, and I could brew, 20, 30 gallons, right? Well, so I built a rig, and it sits over there. You can see the blue cooler in the background. That's sufficient for doing 20, 25 gallon batch. I built that system and almost immediately stopped brewing because now it was just too much work to go and pull the system out and get everything moving. So that was part of the reason why, I talked about this. Simpler processes will mean that you brew more often. I have right here, just off camera, I have a grain father, and I use this all the time now to brew with, and I brew repeatedly. So.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I started with the coolers and everything. I still have 3 different size cooler systems, all kinds of other equipment, but I very seldom use anything but my grain father anymore because it makes great beer and it does it in a breeze, and that's what I care about. Now, science allows for simplicity. Understanding the scientific concepts without slavishly trying to recreate every bit of it is the real key here. Now, I was a chemistry major in college, and so when I got into brewing, I was like religiously scientific about it. It's like everything had to be by the book and stuff like that.
Pardon me?
But what I like to say to people now,
because I could hear you guys. You guys are loud.
I've
Right?
absorbed the science and come out the other side.
You can see Dave.
Can we?
You know what? This
Can we mute that maybe?
In all 4 years that we've been here. Oh, yeah.
Can I mute Drew?
No.
No.
No, I think it's David this time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll mute David.
Unmute Drew. Yeah, we go. Yeah, so like I said, it's like I've been through the science and come out the other side. When I worry about the principles and not the details, and most of all, I worry about the results. Because sometimes I do things that science says you shouldn't do, and it works great. I don't know exactly what to think about that, but I know what to trust.
All right, so here's the keys that we've found. These are the bits of science, the science that you need to know. And I think as long as you know these, you will be able to make good beer, unless, well, you screw something up. What we found is that yeast vitality matters the most. Having good, strong, healthy yeast, and not necessarily the numbers of yeast, but good, strong, healthy yeast matters the most and actually allows you to get away with murder in the brewery. You can do a lot more sloppy practices if you have good, strong, healthy yeast.
Right.
The other thing is it does take quality ingredients to make quality beer. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. So, but you'll see some homebrewers who they try and make the cheapest beer they possibly can by using old ingredients or bad ingredients. So don't do that. Water chemistry, for years I used to ignore my water chemistry. I didn't really care to try to do anything with water. But now what it really does appear is that water chemistry is like the one place where I'm actually willing to bear down and try and figure out how to make it work, right? Fermentation temperatures, they matter somewhat, but not a lot. Mash temperatures don't matter at all.
Well, almost not at all, but it depends on the malt that you're using. But yeah, mash temperatures don't matter like they used to. Malt these days is so diastatically hot that you can mash in a wide range of temperatures and get pretty much the same results.
Yeah, I usually like to think that modern malted barley, you can stare at it funny and it will make beer.
That's true.
And then, of course, all the fiddly things, because all of us do something fiddly with our brew day. None of us are automatons who are just trying to jam out things. All those fiddly things that we do, those are for fun. So if it's something that amuses you, then keep doing it. So for instance, I have a very strange habit. Every time I go to brew, I go light some prayer incense outside the brewery. Doesn't do a damn thing, but it's just part of my routine.
And he calls me a hippie.
No, other people call you a hippie. I know I'm a hippie.
Okay. Next slide.
Right. Yep, sorry.
Okay. So inertia kills brewing days. The more likely, or the easier things are, the more likely that you are to brew. So do everything you can to just smooth the path to a brew day. I'm real lucky. I have a detached garage. All my brewing equipment is permanently set up in it. So when I want to brew, I don't have to go do anything but run out, run some water, and start brewing. I don't have to set anything up. But the idea is think ahead to what you're going to need. If you have to get your gear out of storage, see if you can get that out the day before. Get your water measured. You can even do your water treatment the day before. Get your yeast going, and we'll talk about our yeast starter method, the shaken not stirred method. Get your grains milled, get everything cleaned and ready to go. I don't know about you guys, but I cannot leave my garage brewery until everything is cleaned up and put away. And that just, that may be my obsession, but it sure makes it easier the next time I go out there to start brewing and I don't have to do anything. Checklist is incredibly valuable. I didn't used to believe it until I made the same mistake several times in a row. So,
Wait, Denny, how many times have you left the conical valve open now?
Only twice, but I did it like on back-to-back batches after I swore I'd never do that again. So,
yep.
Yeah. And lastly, this is the real controversial one. Hold off on drinking until you're done brewing, or at least almost done. For me, this is a practical thing. Like I said, I like to get everything cleaned up and put away by the time I leave the brewery. If I've been drinking, that just becomes such a drag. I don't want to deal with it. So I would prefer to start early, get done early, and then get into the drinking.
Yeah, I was going to say my rule of thumb is I wait until I have the fermenters cleaned, the chiller's ready to go, everything's set and it's in the boil, and I'm just on the down slope, right? If I'm there, then I feel okay having a beer. Other times that I haven't ignored that rule, things have gone squirrely, and I couldn't tell you exactly why.
Yeah, every once in a while, I used to have people over to brew, and on those days, then drinking would become kind of the thing to do, and I didn't worry about the beer. It's like whatever comes out, comes out. But, I start brewing by like around 9 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not really ready for a beer at that point.
Yeah, I don't start until about noon.
And those days are long gone for me. So, but as we said earlier, if you like your complicated method, you can keep it, because the bottom line is to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy it, get rid of it. And just real quick, there's a guy in Drew's Homebrew Club that I met who, when he got started brewing, the guy who was helping him convinced him that he should build a system that brews 30 gallons of beer at a time. This guy was saying that he just absolutely hated it. It was so much work. It took all day long. He only brewed once or twice a year because of the amount of effort. And then he was stuck with 30 gallons of the same beer. Well, this guy is now looking at getting a grain father, because that way it's easy and you can brew more often.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, this is the mash filter built by that guy who built the 30 barrel system, or the 30 gallon system for Nico. These things are insane.
Yeah, and unnecessary.
And it hangs up there on the wall.
That's right.
All right, so simplicity and technique. So this is you, Denny.
Yeah, well, it's like, fly sparging. When I started brewing 22 years ago, everybody was fly sparging. It was the thing to do. It was what commercial breweries do. Finally, people realize that there's a real advantage to being a home brewer because you don't have to do what commercial breweries do. And so we got into batch sparging, and I heard about this from George Fix on the Long Gone Homebrew Digest newsletter. And I started trying batch sparging. I wrote the article in Brew Your Own magazine, and now that's why you guys are doing it. But these days, actually, there's a lot of people who are doing no sparge, and that is a very viable technique too, especially if you're doing something like brew in a bag batches on your stove. You can speed your brew day and just need less equipment. Lots of advantages. So the idea is, don't feel like just because something has always been done one way or somebody does something one way, that's what you have to do.
And also, very importantly, just because commercial brewers do it that particular way doesn't mean that we have to do it. So, like, one of the things I like about like the whole brew in a bag thing, I don't do full 20-liter batches in brew in a bag, but I've got a nice. This laptop is actually sitting on top of a pot with an induction burner, and I've got one small basket over there that's got bag in it, as opposed to all the rest of the equipment that's in here. So.
Yeah, I mean, I do brew in a bag batches, 3-gallon batches, 20-minute mash, 20-minute boil, knock out a 3-gallon all grain batch in an hour and a half. Boom, it's great.
So now, when Denny and I both started brewing, because we both started brewing about 99, the rule of thumb was, why would you waste your time doing anything less than 20 liters, right, or 5 gallons? That doesn't make any sense. It takes you the same amount of time. But as we've seen over the past 12, 13 years now, small batch brewing has gotten has become more and more popular, at least here in the States, because it's less space intensive, it's less expensive. I mean, again, the bag, the pot, and the burner that I'm on to allow me to run out here in the brewery, and that was a grand total of like $120 US. It's more friendly, particularly like if you're older or you have injuries, or for other people who can't lift a lot. And it's also a hell of a lot more friendly in terms of experimentation. It's a lot easier to convince yourself to make a cucumber lime goza with hibiscus flowers if you know you only got to drink 2 gallons of it, not 5. And also, like I said, we think brew in a bag is absolutely perfect for this. So there you go. Now the other thing is, a lot of people out there, at least here in the States, the opinion of people is that extract beer sucks, but it doesn't. The problem is that usually extract brewers are brand new brewers who haven't figured out all of the right things to do, how to actually sanitize your equipment, how to get your yeast going so that they'll be healthy, how to do temperature control, right? So the reason why most of the time extract beer sucks is because of the newbie nature of the brewers. We actually both know, and we actually both judged competitions where extract beers have, kicked the crap out of all grain beers.
That's right.
Also,
there are certain styles that extract just really excels in, but you can make just about any style if you get good quality extract and know what you're doing with it.
Yeah, and this picture here is what I call my pissing off the world special. I made a extract Berliner Roggenweiss, Berliner Roggenbeer with Briess Pils extract and Briess rye extract with leftover water from my HLT that I then let sit for a couple days just to be able to, do the lacto ferment, and made it in like 10 minutes. So there you go. All right, we talked about brewing the bag. Stupidly easy, right? And I think this was another one of those things where, again, when Denny and I joined the homebrewing world, if you told people that you were going to make brew in a bag sort of beer, you would have been frog marched out of the community for committing heresy, which is probably the reason why I took the Australians to do it.
It's a lot like just steeping the specialty grains that we all did when we started brewing with extract,
Yep, absolutely. All right. This is Josh's induction setup, right?
Yeah, Josh Weichert.
So
he got rid of this and uses his Pico Z now.
There you go. So the thing is that we all have tools. Denny and I have done a lot of goofy things in the past, including having made a small batch of beer in a coffee pot. Because why not?
Why not?
Now this is Denny's specialty.
Yeah, right. Well, it's one of those things that it's like, I'd heard of people doing like a half-hour mash and stuff like that, and so that was like a challenge. So I had to see if I could cut it down. So I got into doing a 20-minute mash and a 20-minute boil. I learned that you need to increase your bittering hops by 50% over what you would use in a 60-minute boil. Uh, but brewing a bag and doing a very small sparge, a dunk sparge, or just pouring like, a few cups of water through the bag, I would get around 75% efficiency. No sparge is almost as high as that. I would say, in the 70% area, at least that's what I got. So, this is like a really short brew day to get a 3-gallon all grain batch. If you have a family, and soccer practice is coming up, this is something you might want to consider.
Yeah, although this is not the shortest brew day that we've heard of, because we just had a listener question come in where his brew day is from start to finish, like what, 15 minutes long, I think he said?
Something like that, yeah.
But he's doing a lot of stuff that I don't think most of us want to do. All right, so Simple High Tech. No surprise, Denny and I are big fans of this. If you have the means, I know one of your guys was just talking about RoboBrew. And I have a grandfather. Denny has a grandfather as well.
I now have 2 grandfathers.
Yeah, shut up. But well, hey, I have a mash and boil as well. It's just not my electric HLT.
I gave my mash and boil away.
Yep. So the nice thing with these is, again, it's just the same sort of thing. They're simple. You can clean them up quickly, and you can get a lot of. What's really great is that you can get a lot of control, right? So the grandfather, for instance, I can pre-program and I can run from my phone all the mash temperature steps and all that sort of good stuff, and it alerts me when the next step is ready, right? So what I can do is while that's brewing, I can go do something else. Like I can go make dinner, or I can go bathe the dogs, or go do something useful that makes my wife happy, right?
Yep.
And it really just does come down to remembering that we see this again. Earlier, Denny had said that there are a lot of homebrewers out there who have a opinion about how work is the value of the brew day. You're making the beer. The equipment's just helping, and I don't think any of us are going to slag a professional brewery for the fact that they have professional temperature controls, right?
Yeah, right.
So there's that. So hard work is okay, right? Dan?
Yeah, right. So I mean, we're both really busy. Drew especially. Drew is involved in critical infrastructure, and these days he just kind of works around the clock. I'm retired. When we're doing the podcasts and writing books and stuff like that, and we used to travel a lot. Publicizing books and stuff like that. Just didn't have time to brew. But using systems like these, we can actually get in brewing while we're doing our lives too.
Yep. All right. Now this one's fun.
Yeah, right. Dry yeast, like Ed had mentioned in the past, when we started brewing, dry yeast was pretty shaky. There's a lot of really good dry yeast out there now. Drew has been having trouble finding a Saison yeast that's dry that he likes. Saf Lager 3470, you can make great lagers or great ales with it. I find it much cleaner than something like US05, which a lot of people use for a clean ale yeast. And in the Lallemand side of things, their Diamond Lager, I think I might like even better than the 3470. And they make an ale yeast called BRY 97 that is a really, really good ale yeast. And I find that significantly cleaner than US05. Liquid yeast, there's more variety, but it takes some effort because you almost always need to make a starter for liquid yeast. But there's ways to simplify that. And Drew does that by pre-canning his starter wort. He's looking for it now. He's got one there somewhere. Yeah, right. So he's got that, you can make up a batch of wort and you have to pressure can it. Don't just use a hot water bath canner or you're asking for botulism. But you definitely can pressure can it and get done. Or we like to use what's called the shaken not stirred or 007 method. Is that on the next slide here? Hello, there we go. Ah, yes. Yeah. I used to use stir plates and yeast calculators and I stressed over the cell count and stuff like that. And then there was a guy who showed up on the AHA discussion forum he went by Saccharomyces cerevisiae, believe it or not. And this guy knew more about yeast than I knew was possible to know about yeast. And he advocated what was called the shaken not stirred method, which is kind of a throwback to what I did when I started making starters. You put a quart of 1035-ish wort into a gallon container, or you want the container to be 4 times the size of the amount of wort that you put into it. You shake the crap out of that container until it's full of foam, and don't use firm cap or anything like that. Pitch your liquid yeast into it, and then you pitch the entire thing at high Kreuzen 24 hours later into your batch. There's no crashing, there's no decanting, there's no stir plate, there's no yeast calculator. You don't worry about the cell count, because within 2 or 3 hours of getting that yeast into your wort, it's going to go nuclear, and you'll end up with about the same amount of cells as you would have had if you had made a starter. Now,
Yeah, I think the real key is this just goes again to the idea that it's more important to have healthy, vital, active yeast than it is a lot of numbers.
Yeah, that's right. So about 1.5 years ago, we were in Australia for their homebrew conference, and Chris White was there too. And we were sitting around in the bar one night having multiple beers, and I figured, okay, I'm going to kind of like blow Chris's mind. So I told him about this method, right? And, I said, so what do you think? And he looked at me and he said, that's great. Homebrewers are way too hung up on numbers, right? So this method has been endorsed by Chris. It passed John Palmer. John was the technical editor of our latest book. So, and he didn't actually have a heart attack when we talked about this in the book.
And only a minimal amount of grousing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The idea is give it a try. It works. It's way easier, and you don't need to go to all that work to make a yeast starter.
Yep. All right, and now on to water. As I said, I did not used to pay attention to my water until we found new tricks to be able to do it with. So I think the key is to go get a good water calculator. Denny and I are both big fans of the Brewing water spreadsheet. It's an Excel spreadsheet that's put together by Martin Brungard, who is literally a professional water engineer.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing about it is it seems to be the most accurate model that's out there, at least particularly for brewers. And it's cheap. It's like $10 US. And it allows you a lot of flexibility and allows you to be able to do things. The thing we also do tell people to do, stop thinking about cities, stop thinking about styles so much. Start thinking about what the beer color is and what sort of flavor do you want. Do you want something that's swung towards the hops? Do you want something that's in balance, or do you want something that's very full and very malty? Do that. The other thing is also don't sit there and try and nail every single number that's out there. Just adjust the minerals to be able to get to the flavor profile that you want, and then also make sure you're hitting your mash pH.
Yeah, right. It's a 2-step process. Adjust the minerals first to get your flavor profile. After you see what that does to the pH, then you adjust the pH. Don't worry about the pH in the beginning.
Yeah, and truthfully, the good thing is, at least for my water, my brewing situation, brewing water seems to nail the pH close enough that I rarely check the pH in the mash anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on a well with really good water, and it never changes. So the only time I check pH is when I'm brewing a new recipe, just to verify that I got what I was going for. And after that, brewing water will guarantee that I hit it every time.
Yep. All right. And then if that's still too much, which it can be, this is the simplest thing that you need to know. Learn what your water in your area does well, right? Stick to it, which is the traditional way. And then the one thing more than anything else I have to recommend to anybody who is not on a well, but anybody who's on a metro water system, is you must get rid of the chlorine or chloramine that's in your water, right? Here in Los Angeles, We have many thousands of miles of water pipes, so we use chloramine, which is a pain in the ass to get rid of. Now, a lot of homebrewers out there will use things like an activated charcoal filter to try and strip out the chlorine or chloramine.
Which is a pain in the ass in its own way.
Right. Well, because the thing I had never realized before was that if you want to remove chlorine from a beer or from a water, you have to basically flow it through a well-maintained carbon filter at about a gallon per minute. If it's chloramine, which is the more stable stuff, same situation, well-maintained, good filter at 0.1 gallons per minute, which means, I mean, that's how many minutes in order to get enough to do your regular batch? I mean, that's like 100 minutes of water collection, right? So don't do that. What we've landed on instead is just use a small pinch of potassium metabisulfite or like about a quarter of a Camden tablet. Crush that up, mix it into the water, boom, done.
One Camden tablet is enough to treat 20 gallons. So there you go.
Yep.
Adjust accordingly.
All right, and then recipe design. This is my big bugbear. Now, there's a thing that a lot of beer writers won't tell you, and I've talked to some very, very famous beer writers, both on the homebrew and professional side, and they will tell you that, oh, there's a number of recipes in their books that they never brewed, right? And so it's a dirty little secret, but what a lot of us will do, and it's just exactly what I do if I'm in a brewing situation, I want to make something I've never made before, I'll use something that I started with before. And in a lot of ways, I have these sort of template brews that I use. So like this is my template basic pale ale, right? For an American pale ale. And this is fairly close to Denny's, although I think you change around some of the portions of the malt, right?
Yeah, I generally don't use Munich.
Right.
I go for a little bit drier West Coast style, but I definitely always use Crystal. That's a real key.
Yep. And here's my template Saison. You guys know I like to make Saisons. I have 2 of those in the fridge right now. This is what I use to make a stout, because it turns out I'm terrible at doing dark beers on the fly. So here's where we're going to leave you. Denny, you want to summarize it?
Yeah, man. Focus on the clearest path to beer that satisfies you, and that's it right there. That satisfies you. You're doing this for yourself. You don't have a board of directors to satisfy. You don't have customers that you have to worry about if they're going to buy your beer or not. Your main customer and your board of directors is you. So, realize that there are a lot of possibilities for things that you can do and not do. And there are a lot of rabbit holes you can go down to that really are not going to get you any closer to making better beer and enjoying it more. Don't do anything when you're brewing that you don't enjoy doing.
Well, I was going to say, well, we have like 50 people on this call, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I bet you if you asked any of us or all of us, hey, how do you make a blank? You're going to get about 56 answers. Right. So we really do find that the most important thing, to me, the way that you become the best brewer is that you brew more often, right? The more you brew, the better you are at, the more you have the muscle memory at it. So it's very, very important to clear that mental roadblock, the thing that keeps you from brewing. It's also really important to help in that, to make sure that you revisit your process and streamline it to make it simple, right? Simple enough for you and simple enough that you still enjoy it, right?
Yeah, sit down, think about what you do when you brew, and think about what you need to do when you brew.
Mm-hmm. And then last, just to remind you guys to hit on it, sanitation, yeast health, water quality, fermentation temperatures, those are the areas that you should focus on. If you do those, almost everything else will fall in line.
Malted barley wants to become beer.
Amen.
That's right. Okay, question time. We'll take questions on anything from beer to books to ukulele. Bring it on.
So if we could do raising hands, it'd probably be the most orderly way to deal with 50 people. I see Ryan had his hand up first. So Ryan, you got the first question.
Okay. I have a question and a suggestion, but the first question is regarding you. You seem to be a bit dismissive of mash temperature, and I understand that modern malts it's almost impossible not to convert. But for those of us that may be trying to lean towards either drier or heavier bodied beers, and we don't want to play with adjuncts to get there. I mean, mash temperature still seems like it's not it doesn't add to the time in the brew day. It's not all that complicated to try to aim for. Why wouldn't we want to make that a little bit of extra effort while we're at it?
Remember I said within a wide range, right? If I'm making, like, say, a German Pilsner or a triple, I will mash, and mash time does make a difference too. So if I'm making like a German Pils or a triple, I'll mash at 148 for 90 minutes. But, if I'm making, like, say, an American Pale Ale or something, if I'm any place between, say, 150 and 162, it's not going to make a lot of difference. The way that you control the body and things is like with your recipe more than with mash temp.
Yep. And I mean, I've done experiments where I've run, mashes at 150 versus mashes at 156. And it's been really hard to tell any sort of difference, to detect anything. And that's just because most modern malts are going to be that they convert in that fast. And now the things I do see is, like, if, for instance, you're using, say, something like Barca Pils, or if you're trying to find an undermodified malt or an older style malt, then that may have more of an impact. But it's still
hard to find those.
Yeah.
When I was developing my recipe for an American mild, I mashed it at 153 and I mashed it at 165, and I got identical results. So, remember, malt is made for commercial brewers, and what they need to do is cut down on expenses. So they want malt that converts quickly and completely and doesn't need things like a step mash or extended mashing times, because energy and manpower cost money, and that's what they don't want.
Thanks for that. I was going to add on your, this may be the heretical statement here, but on your sanitation matters, which we do know it does matter. I've been brewing over 10 years with my bottle of shark repellent Star San that I just spray on everything and go. And I had a discussion with a sanitary engineer who works for breweries, or did at the time. And he said, yeah, well, look at your volume. You're not going to lose $100,000 if you have a spoiled batch. He said, call me when you have one. I haven't called him since.
Yeah, man, that's right, because he's not a home brewer and we are.
Well, he actually is too.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah. No, he was joking. He just said that, at the scale we are operating, many people over obsess on sanitation, in fact.
Yeah, that many people over obsess on many things, man.
Anyway, thank you. It was a very good presentation.
Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it. Anybody else got anything?
Well, I did want to throw in one other fun part about, in terms of sanitation, something that's helped me relax just a tiny little bit, has been doing some no-chill batches. And that's just, straight hot packed into a cube. Clean the cube, give it a couple of sprays, and let the heat do its thing.
Yep. No chill is a cool thing.
So it looks like the next person is Max. So Max, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure, thanks a lot. I've got a question that's a little bit off topic, but I've just been working on my garage, and you guys were both talking about brewing in your garage. And I'm wondering, what do you do about, like, ventilation? Do you have any sort of hood system to get rid of the humidity, and do you use, like, propane in the garage?
I did for many years. These days it's pretty much all electric, but I use propane in my garage for many years. I have a bank of 3 windows across the back of it and a sliding door across the front of it that I could open for ventilation. Sometimes it did get pretty steamy in there, especially in the winter. I mean, we don't get as cold here as it does up in Toronto, but it gets fairly chilly. But I did not have really any issues not having a hood as long as I had windows.
Yeah, and for me, I live in Southern California, and I have a garage that was built in 1925. This thing couldn't be sealed if I wanted it to. And so, like, for me, and my big problem is, so, like, obviously I'm sweating right now. It's about 33°C here in the garage. And so, but for me, I've got a big door over there and I got a window over here. and I just use fans. Although I've been tempted this summer to go buy an air conditioning unit.
When I moved into this house, the garage was just kind of a shed with a gravel floor. And after I'd been brewing for a few years, I convinced my wife that if we were to remodel the garage, she could have like half of it for her gardening stuff, and I could have half of it for my brewing stuff. And she actually fell for it. And and I have to admit, there's a lot more brewing that goes on there than gardening. But when we rebuilt it, the one thing that I mean, if you have this option, the one thing that I am really glad that I did, and the best feature of brewing, is I put in a floor drain with like an 1/8 of an inch per foot slope down to it. And man, that has made my brewing life 100 times easier.
Yeah, and for me with the propane question, so if I was just using a turkey burner, I'd probably be fine with it. But I've got the brew stand that I do have has 2 big wok burners on it, and if I try to run those in this garage, I would probably die of heat exposure before I could get it halfway into the beer. So that's part of the reason that unit became a pain in the ass. I always had to wheel it out in order to brew.
Yeah.
All right. So it looks like we got Daryl.
Yeah, Daryl was next. Go ahead, Daryl.
First of all, guys, thanks for coming on. I think everyone really appreciated your presentation. It was really great.
Thanks for asking.
As opposed to what Attila said earlier, I actually only heard about you guys through podcasts, so I actually never even knew what you guys looked like. Actually, what drew me in, not only because of your content, what drew me in actually was Denny's voice. I find he's got the most amazing voice. It drew me in almost immediately.
Oh, good Lord.
You guys actually do pretty much look like what I thought you would look like. So,
cool,
anyway,
man.
my question is this: when you guys are starting to do a recipe design, do you approach it based on would you look at historical recipes and approach it kind of making your own adaptations based on what grains you prefer, or would you look at it on just say, this is what I imagine the style to be, and I'm just going to kind of make it up out of what you kind of feel, what you kind of think, or is it kind of based on previous literature and just kind of base it off that? Or
for me, it's a bit of both. If I'm making say a classic beer style or something, I'll do a bit of research first to see what other people have done with it, what the traditional way of doing it is. But then whether it's a classic style or one of my own, I try to taste the beer in my head first,
Now he's the hippie.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's I try and imagine what that beer is going to taste like, and then I think that what it will take to get me there, and one example of that is my bourbon vanilla imperial porter recipe, which you may be familiar with. It's fairly well known. Lots of people have brewed it. So I sat down and I thought about what the end product that I wanted was, and then I started going through what it would take me to get there. And I also brew lots of test batches of things, I very seldom hit exactly what I want the very first time. I think that the bourbon vanilla porter probably took 6 or 8 test batches. My rye IPA recipe, which is another one that's pretty well known, I bet that took at least a dozen test batches before my wife said, yes, this is right, leave it like that. And since she has better taste than mine, that's what I've done ever since.
I don't know. Your wife's taste is pretty questionable, given one of her major choices.
Oh, touche.
And for me, I'll do some research if it's something that I'm not comfortable brewing. But even then, I mean, sadly at this point, I think I've brewed almost everything I can think to brew. So that's where I came up with the idea of having those templates, right? So a lot of times those template recipes, I'll use those to adjust, right? And I can even do that across some boundaries. But I mean, also, let's face it, these days there are things that people know me for, right? So everybody expects me to have a Saison someplace in the list of things I'm doing. And so that's kind of second nature to me now. And I think it takes some time to get there. And I think that gets easier with the things that you like.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have a
So
question.
You would approach it kind of like you would brew it one time, make some notes, say, okay, next time I'm going to brew it, maybe I got to up, say, the crystal malt a little bit, or I'm going to swap this malt out with this malt, and then rebrew it, and again try it.
Yeah,
That's what Denny does.
Yeah, I
That's
mean
not what you do.
that's how the rye IPA came about, right? It was just a standard IPA recipe, and somebody online had mentioned dry malt, and I thought, oh, I'll start swapping some of that, and so I did that. Start changing hops. The important thing is only change one thing at a time, so that you know what's made that difference for you.
Or if you're me, just go hog wild.
Right.
No, because my problem is I don't have Denny's level of patience, which is also the reason why I would make a piss poor scientist as opposed to an engineer. You know, I'm much better at being an engineer than I would ever be a scientist.
Okay, so I have a question for Steve. Is that a jazz bass behind you there, man? I can't hear you.
Yes, it is Fender Jazz. That's the deluxe with the extra built-in preamp. Extra punch.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? So it's a fairly new one.
Yes.
Okay. I got a 73 P bass. I started playing bass in 1965.
Oh, right on. Wow. Yeah, for me it was 1977. So.
Cool, man. Nice. I saw that and I just had to say hi to you, hi to the jazz bass.
Rowan, no problem. I'm glad you got a P. Those are great too. I've always wanted one of those, but that's way
yeah,
too
man.
much money.
Ash body, maple neck.
See, I thought we were supposed to be talking about bass, not bass.
Okay, back to beer. Anybody else got something?
I think Ed was next. Go ahead.
All right, it's more comments than questions, but I just thank you guys. It was great. My neck is actually sore right now because listening to you talk, I was just kind of nodding the whole time. So now it's and this. I mean, you heard part of what I was talking about in terms of simplicity with the Robo Brew, and one of the things that I didn't mention, I don't think you guys mentioned either, was that with the Robo Brew, you set it up the night before. And you preheat it, and I am of an age now where I get up early for a pee, and so I get a preset, and on a Sunday morning at 7:30, I'm dumping in the grains, I'm stirring them, I'm closing it up, I'm going back to bed for an hour, and then I'm coming back down, and I'm bringing it up to a boil, and I'm done before noon.
Yeah, so I don't go quite that far, but I do set it up the day before to preheat so that when I go out there after I've had my coffee the next morning, it's just like dumping in the grains, going from there, sanitizing.
Try dumping in the grains before you have your coffee, because that doesn't take much effort. You don't have to think about dumping the grains, but
I don't do anything before I have coffee.
I hear you. It's that drink of magic beans that wakes it keeps me up.
Plus I'm usually up at 4 a.m. thanks to my dogs.
And then for Drew, you were talking about Saison yeast.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I came across recently, because I love me some Saisons as well. Mm-hmm. And the one that I came across recently when I was experimenting with stuff was the BE 134.
Yep.
The SAF Brew BE 134. And that was amazingly efficient and nicely balanced. And so obviously you're saying, yep. So obviously you've used it and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Although the weirdest part to me is that the way that they actually recommend that you use it is not straight. They actually recommend that you do 2/3 of a pitch of T58 and 1/3 of a pitch of BE 134, which I haven't done. Because I actually like the results I got out of
pouches, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm supposed to buy 3. I don't know. But I haven't done it just because it didn't seem. It's like okay. And I liked the beer that I got out of the BE straight up. It's probably right now my favorite my favorite dry alternative for trying to make a saison. Almost all the other saison yeasts that are out there that are dried are some variant of the French saison strain.
Yeah.
Which is reliable. It's a monster fermenter. It is also boring as fuck.
Yeah.
So if I never have to have another saison in my entire life that's made with 3711 or some similar variant, it will be too damn soon.
Yeah. And one final thing, just to hang with the cool kids. I don't play bass, but my daughter is a jazz bass musician. So
right on, man. Okay, that's close enough, Ed.
All right, and guys, I do have to take a short break. I will be right back, so I'll leave you in Mr. Dincenzo's hands.
Okay, anybody got anything for me that, or can we just like talk shit about Drew while he's gone?
I hear he doesn't like your singing.
No, he doesn't mind the singing as much as the ukulele playing. And not that the singing is any better than the ukulele playing, but it's the ukulele playing I get the crap for.
I was thinking about loading up the podcast song before you guys came on, but
well, you know what? I would have enjoyed. I've been trying to come up with a new one. He wants me to do one for the Brew Files, and I keep coming up with ideas, and he doesn't like them because he's like into all this like hard rock, heavy metal stuff, and he wants me to do that on the ukulele, and I'm like, no, man. I'm sorry. I just do the fun little shit. So we'll see. I actually have a couple ideas for another song that might be for the Brew Files, so we'll see if he'll go for it.
I see Marcelo and David Chang are waiting. If either of you guys are okay just asking your question to Denny, you can go ahead.
Sure, mine is fairly quick. So thank you so much for doing this presentation. All the information you guys put out there, it's always very useful and very fun, and I'm always on the same page. I want to make things simple as well. I got the grandfather a while back and have done 93 batches with it.
Whoa!
I'm very happy with it. Facilitates lives a lot. There was a time that I used to call my wife, say, I'm leaving work. She clicks the button, everything was prepared to warm up. She dumps the grain in. I come back and finish. Come from work and finish the batch.
So she's the assistant brewer.
Yeah, she is.
That's great, man. That's great.
Yeah. So one question. I have done sake and now doing a hard seltzer. So sometimes I like to try stuff. What have you guys tried differently?
I make several batches of cider every year because we have like 12 or so apple trees here on my property. We've got 14 acres. And we have like my wife just does a wonderful job of tending to the trees while I'm off doing irresponsible things. And so we have like all these wonderful organic apples. And so every year we make several batches of cider out of them. So I've learned a fair bit about cider making just through experience. I've learned what I like, what I don't like, what works, what doesn't work. I've learned which of those apples makes the best cider too, and how to blend them and stuff like that. But that's about it. I'm not really into hard liquor. I make wine every once in a while, but that is such a long-term process that I get very impatient. Yeah. But we are kind of like right in the heart of wine country here in Oregon. So there's a lot of good wine around. It's easy to find good basic ingredients and stuff like that. But the instant gratification is what I lack. And I'm trying to think, I don't think I've done anything other than cider and wine, no sake, no like hard alcohol, anything like that. So I'm not very adventurous really. It's like I find out what I like and I stick to it. Same thing when I brew, I tend to brew the same recipes over and over again because I know that that's what I like, so.
All right.
Drew, on the other hand, we'll keep seeing what kind of crazy shit he can throw into the beer. So,
I was waiting for the clam chowder saison reference.
oh man, that one. Okay, I should wait for him to get back here, and then we'll tell the clam chowder. Okay, man, it's time for the clam chowder saison story.
Oh, all right.
So about what was it, 5 years ago or so? We got
San Diego NHC.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, we got invited to go down to Brazil for their homebrew conference. And we were in the process of writing the Homebrew All-Stars book, which I'd mentioned. We talked to like 25 different homebrewers and stuff. We'd sent out all these questionnaires to them with questions about their favorite ingredients, their equipment, how they brew, all that kind of stuff. And they were slow getting them back because, let's face it, our schedule is not their schedule. We're asking them for a favor. So finally, at one point, I sent out an email to all of these people saying, look, we need to get these back because otherwise Drew has threatened to unleash on the world a Manhattan clam chowder saison.
And I don't know how well that translates up north, but Manhattan clam chowder saison was a Portuguese variant of clam chowder made in Rhode Island. And the people in New England, who are all my ancestors, hated the idea so much that they referred to it as Manhattan because everything bad came from New York.
So 10 minutes after I sent this letter out, Drew sent me an email back saying, no, if I made a clam chowder saison, it would be a New England clam chowder saison, and here's the recipe, right? So we were on our way to Brazil, and I was going to be stopping down in LA on the way. So I decided that I'd spend the night there, and we'd get in a brew session, and we would brew the clam chowder saison. John Palmer lives fairly close to Drew, so we had John come over, and we actually have photographs of John pouring the potato flakes into the mash tun that I'm hanging on to in case I need to blackmail him someday.
Yeah, well, how do you think we got that book through his technical edit?
Yeah, right. We threatened to show people those pictures. So we made the clam chowder saison. We went down to Brazil. We came back. We decided we were going to serve it at the homebrew conference in San Diego that year. And I have to admit that while it was not the kind of beer you'd want to sit on your porch and have several pints of, it was a damn successful experiment. I had expected it to be a gag and spit experience. And it was actually a very interesting beer.
It's almost like I know what I'm doing.
No, it's like we got lucky is what it is.
Yeah, well, because really what it was is, I mean, it's a Saison base, so Pilsner malt, and instead of using wheat, I used mashed potato, the mashed potato flakes, and used that to actually give a really incredible silkiness. It was really amazing. And so the idea was to get a little potato flavor and to get the flavors that you'd expect from clam chowder saison, or from clam chowder, I should say. And so we had the mashed potatoes in there that gave enough silkiness that it didn't need any lactose. So yay. And then the beer itself, or the wort, had a bottle of clam juice with clam parts added to the whirlpool. So it was whirlpool clammed. And then, but at the same time that we
you'll never hear those words again.
Nope. And at the same time the whirlpool was happening, that was also when I added thyme, bay leaf, black pepper, all the stuff that you'd expect as a seasoning in clam chowder, right? And then that got fermented. It was one of the few times that I think it is actually appropriate to use the French Saison yeast, because it also gives a thicker mouthfeel in a way. And so that was kind of, it ended up actually being a really successful beer. I did take the second half of the beer, because remember I was brewing on that big rig over there in the corner. Took the second half of that beer, and instead of putting the clam juice and the spices in there at the whirlpool, I had actually taken half of it out, chilled it down, ran that straight, and then because of that creaminess from the potatoes, I actually dosed the second half with a tincture of Earl Grey tea and made an Earl Grey tea saison. So there you go.
Yeah.
And by the way, so I saw Steve was mentioning about cock ale, and of course Denny then also had to give a bad joke
The
in
standard
the comments.
joke, yeah, right.
The thing is, yeah, you go back and you read a lot of early brewing and cider making and winemaking history. There's meat involved in a scary amount of it, and they didn't quite understand why. They just knew that fermentation seemed to perform better if they did something like hang a side of beef in the ale. And we now know today that that's because it was leaching off basically proteins and nutrients that the yeast were using. And so it really was actually a technique. So there you go.
I thought now would be a good time to bring up the beer that Guillaume, one of our club members, did for a festival called Cask Days, where you brew 11 gallons, put it in a cask, and then you serve it to thousands of people. And he brewed inspired by yours, like he said in the chat, a Caesar beer. And in Canada, Caesars have Clamato in them, not Bloody Marys.
Oh, interesting.
By the way, I fully stand with you all on the idea that a Caesar is a far superior brunch cocktail than a Bloody Mary. Although I don't know if you guys are adding fried chicken and pizza to the top as garnishes.
Lobster tails, yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know if I have permission to share my screen, but I just tried to share a picture of Palmer stirring in the potato flakes.
I think you should have access. If you don't have access, keep trying. Maybe I can say multiple participants can share. I'll give full
Oh, here
sharing.
we go. There we go. Here we go. Did that work?
Yep.
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah, there he is. So I guess now he's going to owe me money.
Yeah, we actually had John fly up for our competition last fall, and we put him in a big golden crown made of hockey sticks, and had him judge beer.
Oh, that's great. He's a wonderful guy. I love John.
I remember the days when we could travel. Damn it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I see David's been waiting for a while.
Okay.
Just one question. First of all, Denny and Drew, thank you very much for attending and being able to present, because I'm still what I consider myself as a reformed homebrew newbie. I used to brew back in the late 80s, early 90s, and then I stayed away from it because it just tasted like homebrew. And then I came back to it, and I came back to it a couple of years ago, and I was like, wow, this is entirely different. The world has changed, and everything's, it tastes like beer. So I wanted to thank you guys for attending, because I was unaware of all the different podcasts that are out there, and yourselves, and it's been very entertaining. But I wanted to find out, because you mentioned the book, where can I get the book? Right, this new book that you guys are doing. Because
I know
it sounds
Amazon
good.
has it. Yeah, Amazon definitely has it.
Yeah. Now let's check and see if Amazon Canada has it. I have to imagine they would.
I actually ordered it at the beginning of the meeting, so yes, they do.
Okay.
Or they did, as it were.
Yeah, and of course also I'm not sure. I think Brewers Publications does do international shipping to Canada as well, so you could always get it there. However, I will say that Amazon Canada will be a better price.
And I would just like to say thank you to Chris for holding up a copy of the book. He's diving for it again. Oh, he's got All Stars
awesome.
too. I love
Good
All
stuff.
Stars, man. That's one that most people don't know about.
Yeah. But by the way, can I say that we keep saying that we've interviewed like 25 of the world's best homebrewers. Yeah, we were audacious enough to put ourselves in that crew too.
Our editor told us we had to. We really weren't intending to. And it's like, oh, what about you guys? It's like, yeah, you don't know us that well, bud.
It just sounds like it's a great read, and it sounds like a lot of fun. And it is exactly, Denny, I know you mentioned it a lot. It's a lot about being a hobby and enjoying yourself doing that hobby. Yeah. Because once it becomes once it becomes a little bit more stressful than a hobby, it's no longer a hobby. It becomes more like
what's the point? What's the point? It's not something you have to do. It's something you want to do, right?
Yeah. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, with your spare time. What the hell are you doing, people?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. So the other thing you're going to notice about the books is that they're kind of like written like the way we talk. There's like a lot of back and forth dialogue in them and stuff like that. When we were in Brazil, we were like on a tour bus to go out and visit some breweries and stuff like that. And Drew and I started doing our little back and forth thing. And one guy turned to another one and said, "God, it's like the books have come to life."
Yeah. Now, by the way, none of this is scripted. None of this is, you know, a shtick. This is just exactly who we are with each other.
It's like Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon, if you're that old.
All right, and I see we got. I think Daryl has his hands up for a question.
Actually, a pretty good segue. I hope this is a short answer question. I was going to ask you guys, like, you guys seem like a pretty like oddball like group of guys. I'm stopping short of saying couple. Like, how did you guys meet? Did you meet at like a homebrew club, or like you seem like you feed off each other pretty well, but you seem kind of like different people.
At the homebrew conference in Denver, and I don't know, what was that, like 2008, something like that.
Yeah, about that.
I was in a shuttle van from the airport to the hotel. Drew suddenly jumped in and goes, "Oh, hi, my name's Drew," and you know, I said, "Okay, great, fine." We started talking. We met. Several years later, I'd been trying to get a book deal, and nobody really wanted to sign me because I kind of write like a lawyer. You know, I'm good at doing the research and finding things out, but it's very boring writing. And Drew was just in the process of finishing up. Was it your cider book?
Yep.
And he had been approached by a publisher to do a book called Experimental Homebrewing. They wanted it to be like Randy's Radical Brewing.
Yeah.
But, you know, so anyway, Drew said to them, "Look, I don't really have time to do this, but I have a friend who wants to write a book. How about if we co-author?" So we started talking, and we decided nobody can out Randy. So what we wanted to do was approach the book not just from the point of view of unusual beers and ingredients, but from the science side of experimental too. And that was my side, and that's where we started getting into doing all the experiments. This was where, you know, way before Marshall was even old enough to drink beer, philosophy. So, you know, so we did that book, and it became pretty popular, and unfortunately the publisher just really sucked, so it's out of print now. But we started working together, and we really, you know, when you're doing that, especially when you're 800 miles apart, sometimes the process gets a bit strained, but overall we really enjoyed it, and we really enjoyed the aftermath of getting out to go out and talk to people about the book and stuff like that. So we did another one, and that was All Stars. And then All Stars got done, and I said, "Oh, I've got this other idea. Let's do another one." So we did 3 books back to back without any time off in between.
Yeah, if that doesn't make you aware, Denny and I are both a special kind of stupid.
Very much so.
But yeah, because we knew each other because we both worked on the HA governing committee. You know, so we had met there as well. And of course, you know, if you're online, you're talking about homebrew beer, at some point in time, you're going to run into some asshole named Denny Conn.
I'm afraid that's true.
and run into a contrary opinion that he may have of you. Although I do, Denny, you remember what the first beer that you had of mine was?
I think it was your champagne beer in Orlando, wasn't it?
Believe it, yeah. It was either the champagne beer in Orlando or it was the guacamole Saison.
Oh, that was later. That was someplace else. But yeah, I mean, when I met Drew, the first beer in Orlando, he had a series of champagne beers. I remember him standing up on top of the table and shooting corks across the ballroom from the beers. And then, God, was it San Diego? Someplace else. A couple of years later, I was walking through the lobby of the place with a friend, and Drew came up to me and said, "Hey, I've got a keg of my guacamole Saison here. You want to try it?" And my first reaction was to scream and run, but I didn't. I actually tried the beer, and for guacamole Saison, it didn't suck. So come on from there.
Yep. Well, I mean, look, this was in my, shall we say, my more experimental youth.
Yeah, let's do.
But no, so that's how we ended up making it work. And also Denny at some point decided that he wanted to retire, and I decided that was a bad plan, and so that's why we do the podcast.
Yeah.
So if we have time for one more, I was just going to interject and say I see Attila's been raising his hand physically in the window for a little while. Maybe he couldn't find the raise hand button. But Attila, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, because I didn't want to let you go for another half hour with your hand raised physically.
Okay. Hi, guys. Okay, I tried doing the reactions. All I got was a clap and a thumbs up. So that's why I couldn't get the hands up. So I'm like, hands up. Anyway, first of all, it's been a pleasure to talk to you guys. Second of all, Drew, I know you like the Saisons. I do Saisons as well. Mm-hmm. Try the spooky Saison from Escarpment, which is really nice. I use that all the time. It's a really good thing. All I use is, I think, Pilsner and some acidulated, and it comes out really nice.
I'm going to guess that must be some isolate from Fantôme.
I'm sorry, from
Fantôme in Belgium, in Soie.
I'm not sure, but it's their spooky Saison from Escarpment.
I believe that's true.
I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense, right? Fantôme, Ghost.
Okay. And I'm with you guys. I'm a brewer from way back, and I brewed a while, and I stopped, and I got back into this, saying, you know what? All these brew pubs are popping up. I was like, hey, I can do it, and I have improved all my stuff. And I'm like you guys, simple. What I went from, I used to do extract, but I'm like, I sort of got into the all grain, but I do brew in a bag, which is simple, quick, and I'm done in 3-4 hours. I went from 10 gallons down to 5, so I can have different beers and quick brew days, quick cleanup, and everything's spick and span and gone.
Yep. Well, I mean, one of the nice things about these all-in-one systems that they're coming out on the market, right? Like Ed was talking about the RoboBrew earlier. I mean, really all they are is stainless steel brew in a bag.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And I still brew on propane out in the winter. Everybody goes, "You're brewing outside in the winter." I go, but I got a heating element right beside me. So what the hell's the difference? You know.
Right.
And then chilling down is easy because I let it chill out in the winter. It's perfect and it's good to go.
I do have to ask. I do have to ask. What is winter?
It's cold. You guys wouldn't know cold out down there in Oregon and California. It's like it's 30 minus, not 30 like you guys have. It's minus 30 here.
I grew up in Iowa, and it was damn cold there in the winter.
It is cold.
I think the coldest I've ever been in my life was somebody's summer cabin on Lake George, like during January. So not with permanent exposure, but that was enough for me. Thank you.
But I think the last month or and a half ago, like right now, month and a half now, we've been having your weather up here, like 30 Celsius plus 35, humidity of 45 Celsius, which is like 100 and something.
Yeah, whoa, man.
100 something.
The world is weird.
By the way, I did see a question I wanted to get to real quick. Rob and Sandra were asking how do you get the grainfather to boil faster if you don't have the higher voltage grainfather? The thing that I've done, because Denny has one to play with, I don't. They sell independent heating elements that you can plug in, and so you just run it off to a different circuit, and you can plug that in and have it immersed in the kettle, and it will heat up faster because you're just basically adding more heat.
Yeah, and the jacket helps a lot too, but what really helps is getting a 220 volt unit like I just did.
Yep,
makes a big difference.
And I'm also going to be looking forward to your articles in the Brew magazine as well. I read it all the time, so keep it up, guys. Good articles.
Thanks, man. We got another one. The next one is on what? I forget.
Don't look at me, man. I can barely remember my name.
I know. We just crank them out and send them in, and it's like, okay, time for the next one. So thank you all for having us, you guys. It has been a blast talking to you. We really appreciate the invitation.
Oh, it's been an honor. So thank you so much. I think we're all very thankful to have you guys share your years of experience and your entertainment and laughs.
if there's any questions you didn't get in, I'm Denny at experimentalbrew.com, and he's Drew at experimentalbrew.com. So just shoot us an email.
Yep.
This has been awesome, guys. Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome, Dave.
Thank you so much, and keep brewing good beer.
That's right, man. See y'all later.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.